The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 27 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 20th of February, 2020, from the Aviator Sound Studios somewhere in Southern California. On this episode of Squawk Ident, I have the honor of speaking with an aviator and a colonel in the United States Army. We discuss his progression and the choices that he has navigated on his journey in aviation and his service to our country. We take a look at how his choices have carved a path filled with opportunity that will allow him to keep soaring among the blue skies ahead. Stay with us to hear more about this soldier's journey on this episode of Squawk Ident. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, right after a brief word from our sponsors. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show, and thank you for listening to the Squawk Ident podcast. I've been producing the show now for a little over 4 months, and I am grateful to be able to take this time to express how very thankful I am for all of your listenership and support. As the show has grown, I've been able to sit down with some amazing people that have shared their journey with us. This episode of Squawk Ident is absolutely no exception. I recently had the privilege to speak with an individual that I have known for quite some time now. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him and his judgment. Here now is the audio from an interview I conducted with this individual a few days ago while on a layover in Honolulu. I hope you enjoy it. His journey started out at the age of 16, where a high school guidance counselor suggested that he try out for a program that would reward the top student in his class to earn a discovery flight in a Cessna 172. It is of no surprise that he earned that achievement and thus kicked off his journey in aviation. He continued his education by attending Widener University, where he earned his undergrad degree in business while in the ROTC program. After graduation, he became a commissioned officer in the United States Army, where he was selected to become an Apache helicopter pilot. Upon completion of his active duty period, he moved to Arizona, where he attended a fixed-wing flight school at the Phoenix Deer Valley Airport, formerly known as Pan Am International Flight Academy. Upon completion of that program, he found employment as a ferry pilot for an aircraft sales broker in the Valley. Now, for those of you who don't understand what a ferry pilot is, I'll take a moment now to explain. So, an aircraft broker brokers aircraft sales to prospective buyers, and they hire pilots to go and pick up the aircraft, ensure logbooks are in order, and the aircraft is safe to fly. They then fly that aircraft from the seller to the buyer or to the buyer's
a maintenance facility where they go and check out the aircraft. And that is what he did for quite some time. Well, after canvassing the local flight schools around the Phoenix area, one day he stumbled into a flight center we both had in common, Tailwind Flight Center at Chandler Airport. After a brief time as a CFI, he received a call from Piedmont Regional Airlines to interview with them. After spending some time as a de Havilland Dash 8 pilot, he sought out an opportunity to fly for another airline, ExpressJet. There, he earned a type rating in the Embraer 145. It was not long after that he was able to find a reserve unit where he was stationed to fly the C-12, an aircraft in the civilian world known as the King Air 200. He was soon after deployed to the Middle East. Upon his return, he was stationed in North Carolina, where he was able to be assigned to the Uc35 squadron, which is the civilian equivalent of the Citation 500. Upon another completion of deployment, he returned to find himself a Uc35 jet instructor for the U.S. Army. He soon became a Black Hawk battalion commander at Fort Knox, and is currently a C-12 instructor in Alabama, where he is working on his second master's degree in strategic studies from the U.S. Air Force Air War College. Please help me in welcoming to the show Colonel Terry Schooler. Well, Terry, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. So, Terry, you and I have been online talking to each other for many years. A couple times we've even been able to get together while I was on a layover somewhere. And you've come out and you've always been very gracious in spending the time to talk to me and share your stories and, talk about airplanes and all the things that us aviators like to do when we hang out and drink a beer, right?
That's right.
So, taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down with us here at Squawk Ident is an absolute privilege, and I thank you for that. So, what I really wanted to start out with you is how you got started. I mean, we all have that moment, that very, that first flight, that first, drive to the airport. Something happened in everybody's journey. What happened in your journey? What was your moment?
So I would say there were a lot of little things, as I was a kid. I mean, what kid growing up in the 80s didn't watch Top Gun and want to be a fighter pilot, right? But it was one of those pie in the sky kind of things at that point in time. I think what really kind of got the hook into me was I was 16 years old, I think, and my high school guidance counselor threw this flyer in front of my face and said, "Hey, I think you might be interested in this. Go check it out." So it was a flyer for something called an Aviation Career Education Academy. It was run by two U.S. Airways pilots out of Philadelphia, and they put on this. I believe it was a 2-week kind of a day camp kind of thing during the summer, and you'd go in the morning and you'd learn about every aspect of the aviation industry, from the maintenance side to the flying side. I remember we got to go into the tower and the approach control facility at McGuire Air Force Base, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So we got to see, all aspects of it. Got to learn all about aviation and the different sides of it. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they had this prize, and the prize was for the top students a discovery flight, a 1-hour discovery flight. So I was fortunate enough to be one of the top 2 students, and got to go out to Flying W Airport in I think it was Lumberton, New Jersey, and get in a Cessna 172 and fly over to Northeast Philadelphia Airport, and that was it. That's kind of what got me hooked.
You remember that flight specifically, or just kind of in general, or?
Um, I don't remember everything about it because that was the first time I was in an airplane that size. So I remember some things about the flight, but definitely remember the end and coming into land and being, whoa, this is crazy, but it was so cool. I just remember walking away from that flight, going, wow, this is awesome. I really want to keep doing this.
Yeah.
So,
and that you said you were 16?
yeah, I think I was 16 at the time.
Yeah. So how long between at 16 taking your first flight before you decided, okay, I might take some training? How many years passed?
Well, so I did not actually get in a small airplane again for many years. But I went to college, graduated high school and went to college just outside of Philadelphia. And I went on a 4-year ROTC scholarship. And the thought was, I'll go into the Army. If I can be a pilot, I'm going to try to be a pilot. Obviously, the Air Force is probably the service you want to go to if you want to be a pilot. But the Army's got aviation as well, and so I thought I would give that a shot. And I was fortunate enough my junior year to get selected to go be an Army aviator, and then once I graduated college and reported for flight school at Fort Rucker, Alabama, I learned how to fly helicopters. So between flights in smaller aircraft was probably, I guess, feels longer, but it was probably about 6 years.
So that seed that was planted by, just a recommendation from a guidance counselor in high school. I mean, that's pretty rare to hear, especially nowadays, a young person, actually even seeing a guidance counselor in a high school setting. And then that's planted a seed, and through the ROTC program and through your university education, decided that, hey, I'm gonna get into the U.S. Army, and if I can become a pilot, great. How did that transition go? Because I've heard stories from fellow aviators in the cockpit, and they tell me how they were trying to go one direction and they ended up, it's the U.S. government, you go in a different direction, and you just have to kind of be okay with it. Did that transition work really smoothly for you, or how did that work?
So going, I guess going back to high school, I mentioned the Air Force, and I thought that I was trying to get into the Air Force and go down that road and become a pilot. And then I think it was also during my junior year that I was sitting in a class one day, and the words on the page started getting a little blurry, and that lasted for a few days. So told my mom. We went to the eye doctor. I walked out with a pair of glasses. So that kind of, for me, that kind of crushed the thought of going to the Air Force, because at that time, it was 20/20 vision, perfect health, and if you didn't have that, you weren't going to fly. So once that happened, that's when I kind of shifted focus to the Army. Knowing, so I'm an Army brat, meaning that my dad served. He served 27 and a half years before he retired. And so I went into to Army ROTC knowing that I could end up doing something else, but I still wanted to see if I could pursue flying. And, I wore those glasses for about a year until the eye doctor determined I didn't need them anymore. So, but at that point it was too late to try to shift back to the Air Force. So I continued down the path of the Army. And I was fully aware that I might not get the chance to fly. And that's okay, because that's not why you sign up to be an officer in the United States Army.
Right.
You sign up to be an officer in order to lead troops. If you do get the opportunity to fly, that's just icing on the cake. And luckily for me, I like icing, and they let me have it. So
there you go.
Yeah.
And so did you get to pick your equipment? How did that transition?
So I did. They actually about, I guess it was at that point in time, and the whole process has changed, as we're talking this is over years ago. But at that point in time, you could you would make your request. You'd make your request for the type of aircraft you wanted to fly, and then you'd make your request for the location where you wanted to be stationed. And so I requested, top on my list was the Apache, because my thought process in my youth was, hey, if I'm going to go fly an aircraft and somebody's going to be shooting at me, I want to shoot back. So
there you go.
That's what led me to choose the Apache. So about halfway through flight school, they doled out the aircraft assignments, and I got my first choice. So I got to fly the Apache.
Nice. And I remember, were you ever deployed on that very first commission, or were you just training and stayed in the States?
No, I so after flight school, I reported to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, for the 101st Airborne Division, and that was in April of 2000 that I got there. The unit was in the middle of, or just getting ready to start, actually, the conversion from the A model Apache to the Delta model Apache Longbow. And so we went away for 8 months as a unit to learn how to fly the Longbow as a unit, and then once we got back, actually while we were gone is when 9/11 happened. And so they kind of rushed us through the program. One of our sister units deployed to Afghanistan shortly after 9/11. And then when we got back, of course, everything, all the talk was about Iraq and going that way. So we, in February of 2003, we started loading up our stuff in preparation to head to the Middle East. And of course, in March 2003, the war kicked off. We were sitting in Kuwait when the war kicked off. It was another unit that left first and kind of led the charge, but we were right behind them. So I spent 3 months deployed that first time, and got orders to leave the deployment and come back to the States to move on to another assignment. So at that point in time, there was no real clarity on what was going on. Like when we first got to Kuwait, they were telling us we'd be home by September, and the war would be over and all would be hunky-dory, and
right.
that everyone knows that is not how it happened. But so they weren't sure how they were going to manage their people, and they let people first. They said people, you can't leave, and then they would let some people go, and then they said you can't leave, and then let go. And so I kind of got caught in one of those, hey, you got orders, go.
Right.
So
okay, so you ended up coming back to the States, and you continued to fly the Apache at that point, or how did that transition to you going fixed wing after that?
So I came back from Iraq in about June of 2003 to go to another of the. So the military has a school. Basically, every time you get promoted, you got to go to school for however many months. So I left Fort Campbell and went back to Fort Rucker, Alabama. Went to school for 6 months, and then left Fort Rucker and went out to Fort Hood, Texas, where I joined up with a new Apache unit that was getting ready to go do the same thing that I had done with the first unit, go through and transition from the A model to the D model Apache. Mm-hmm. And then I was there with that unit for about a year and a half before I left active duty.
I see. So you left active duty and decided, I'm going to move to Arizona. What sparked that transition? How the heck did you pick one of the hottest places in the continental U.S.?
So while I was in Texas, actually even before I got to Texas, while I was in Alabama, I had started working on my private pilot, I guess you'd call it an add-on rating. I already had a commercial helicopter rating at that point. But I started working on my private pilot rating for single-engine airplanes. Mm-hmm. And I got that in Alabama. And then when I moved to Texas, I continued with the instrument rating in airplanes. So while I was in Texas that time, I was leaning towards getting out of the military, and the airline, the thought of going to the airlines was starting to appeal to me quite a bit. So I started, researching how I might accomplish that goal at that point while I was still on active duty. And so then I went to my commander and told him, hey, sir, I want to get out. I want to leave active duty. I want to go be an airline pilot. And I actually credit him quite a bit because he forced me to go do a significant amount of research. His comment back to me was, okay, I'll support you, but you need to come to me with a plan. So I researched a whole bunch of schools and financing options, and tried to figure out how I was going to actually accomplish this goal. I put quite a bit of research into it, and I went back to him with a plan, and he said, okay, I'll sign your paperwork. So I credit him with helping me to develop the plan on how I was actually going to achieve that goal. So originally my plan was to go to, at that point in time, Pan Am had two campuses. They had the campus in Phoenix, and they had the campus in Fort Pierce, Florida. Mm-hmm. So my thought was, with my wife being from Alabama, we'd go to the campus in Florida. That way we wouldn't be too far from family. Sure. And about 3 months before I left active duty, I get a phone call.
Yeah.
And the phone call, it's from Pan Am. I'm like, hey, everything okay with my application, my deposit, all that stuff. And they're like, yeah, everything's great, except we're closing the Florida campus. So
it's not there anymore.
We'll give you your deposit back if you'd like. Yeah. Or, you can come out to Phoenix and fly with us out here.
Yeah. What was the name of that hurricane? Do you remember?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember the name of the hurricane that took out all the airplanes there at the campus?
Oh, no. I
remember that. I was actually at Pan Am in Deer Valley during the hurricane and just graduating. And
okay.
They said, we told you. They had a big meeting. All the students came in. All the chief pilots and instructors were there. And I know we told you that if you graduate and you don't have any major hangups, that you'll immediately be offered a position to be a flight instructor here. Unfortunately, hurricane whatever just took out our campus in Florida. And all of those people who are actively flight instructors are given the opportunity to be a flight instructor here in Phoenix. So we're going to have a lot of people move out and be with us. And the airplanes are going to be ferried out to this campus. We're going to only have one campus in the United States. And that was the time when you were actually getting ready to go to the Florida campus. And that's why they decided to close that campus is because the damage was just too much. And a couple years earlier, they had damage not quite as significant, but from another hurricane. So their insurance company said, listen, your insurance rates are going to go through the roof if you want to continue to do business here, or, you can close and go just consolidate into one campus. And that's exactly what happened with the Pan Am International Flight Academy. So that's why I ended up at Tailwind, because I didn't want to wait 4, 5, 6 months for a phone call to say, okay, we can offer you a flight instructor position now that you've graduated. And when I asked them, well, what am I supposed to do between now and then? I remember the chief pilot looked at me and said, well, I know Home Depot's hiring. That's a good temporary job. And I was like, no, I don't think so. So I was, talking to the designated examiner that I used for probably 3 or 4 of my ratings. And he said, listen, there's a school down here in Chandler, Arizona, and it's a good school. It's they've got their own set of instructors there. It's growing. It was just purchased from these guys called they would call them T1 and T2 because they're both named Tom, and they're good businessmen. So it's going to be a good thing. Why don't you go apply? And that's how I ended up there. And then right around that time, which I think was around 2005, you started attending the Phoenix campus of Pan Am Flight Academy. Is that correct?
I did. I got there in we got there in July of 2005, and I started training shortly after that. So I looked it up real quick. The hurricanes. So 2004, Florida was struck by 4 hurricanes: Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Gene. And that is what pushed Pan Am over the edge.
That's it. Yeah, and rightfully so, because Florida is the #1 state in the union to have the most flight training going on, and Arizona comes in at number 2, and it's simply because of the weather. You've got good weather, almost year round. You don't have to worry about winter operations or extreme weather usually. Well, Florida obviously had hurricanes and whatnot, and thunderstorms, but most of that was minor in comparison to how much beautiful time there was to fly. And Arizona came in right there. Now Arizona, I believe, is the busiest general aviation state, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it is. I know Florida's not far behind.
Yeah.
If they are behind, but it's. I know. I've done quite a bit of flying throughout Florida, and it is always busy. Always.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I get to Tailwind, or I'm sorry, I get to Pan Am in July of 2005, and start my training there. And the first thing about Arizona, we get to Arizona in the summer, and we're trying to move into it. My wife and I are trying to move into an apartment, and it's 110 degrees in the shade.
Yeah.
And so that was an adventure. But so I started training there in July of 2005, and then just worked through the ratings. I know that I was there for maybe 2 months with my first instructor, and then he got an interview and left pretty quickly, and he is now at Delta. Then I started with another instructor, and he actually was able to take me through the rest of my time there before he got hired. I think he went to ExpressJet first, and I think now he's at United. So I think all that. I say all that just to say that Pan Am turned out a really good product. You paid for it. It wasn't the cheapest place to get your flight training, but it was certainly a very good product or a very good school that produced a tremendous amount of fantastic aviators. So
most aviators, I think, that go to Pan Am
or a school like it where it's a vocational school, not a college program. But it's a vocational school. You come in with what you have. You don't have to have a college degree. But this was a different time, and now it just behooves any applicant to be going to a program where you can get an aviation sciences degree commensurate with your aviation studies, simply because then you can apply for a restricted ATP and get a job and start having an income a lot earlier than having to work through your 1,500 hours somehow. However, this was a time where you mentioned that even the flight instructors were getting calls. The hiring started up again with regional airlines, and you had quite a bit of an advantage as well, because you were coming into this. You had a couple ratings, fixed wing ratings already, but you have this tremendous background, both education wise and with your time in the military with the helicopter training. So you were kind of used to this whole fire hose mentality. We kind of talk about this quite a bit here. You got to study, fire hose mentality, meaning you're getting so much information and you're expected to retain it, and not just, memorize it rotely, because when you're in the airplane and all of a sudden something happens, you're not going to go, oh, let me look that up. It's, I know it's in this book somewhere. I mean, you gotta refer to it immediately. Did you feel that the training that I know you said that you thought it was a good product there at Pan Am, and I agree, it was a very good product. It was very high paced training environment. But what was like probably the biggest challenge for you at that moment in your life? You were already experienced, so you had a little bit of a leg up. But did you still find the challenges that difficult, or were you able to kind of just work through it relatively easily?
I would say that the knowledge part, the book knowledge part of it, was it was certainly a robust curriculum, and there was a lot to learn. I mean, you know what they say about aviation, you never stop learning. So there was definitely a lot to learn. Um, I think that the training that I got in the Army, going through flight school, had prepared me, not necessarily for the knowledge, but had prepared me in study habits. I felt like I was maybe a little bit older than a lot of the students at Pan Am. Not much, just a couple of years, but having had some of that life experience before, I think that helped. But I'll tell you, I didn't learn how to study in college. I learned how to study when I went to Army flight school.
Yeah.
Just it was so intense. Just the amount of stuff that you had to study every day. I mean, it truly was a fire hose. So I do feel like by the time I got to Pan Am, I had a leg up. Just in understanding how that process worked. For me, as far as the flying part of things, I'd gotten used to being in airplanes, working on ratings while I was still on active duty, and so that part of it wasn't too bad. There, everybody's got some maneuvers that they struggle with, and
Sure.
I was no exception to that rule. But overall, I think the training in the military was it effectively prepared me for going through Pan Am.
Yeah, and you got through it. You got through it relatively quickly as well. It wasn't long after you were able to finish that program and start looking for work out there to build your hours. And you were telling me you were having a little bit of a hard time at first. How did that transition go from here? You're graduated. Here's our blessing. You're a CFI, double IMEI. You went through did you do the JET program as well at Pan Am?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. So I did that program. I'd actually already started putting out applications while I was time building at Pan Am. So I hadn't started my CFI, MEI, double I. I hadn't started any of that yet.
Yeah.
And I'd already started putting out applications because I had gotten some information that some of the regional airlines were looking at helicopter time very favorably. And at that point in time, so I left active duty with 600 hours of helicopter time, and I had probably about 200 hours of airplane time. And so I actually applied with ASA, Atlantic Southeast Airlines. And I remember I hit submit on the application. It was on the computer, and it was Sunday night. The next day, I started class for my MEI. And while I was in class, I got a phone call from an Atlanta area code. And so I excused myself from class, and I picked up the phone, and it was their hiring manager. And I had 96 hours of multi-engine time. He told me, go get your 4 hours, call me back.
Wow.
So I had a decision to make. I'm like, I just started my MEI. You know what? I'll get that 4 hours as by the time I complete my MEI, I'll definitely have those 4 hours.
Right.
So I went through that MEI curriculum, and I called him back and left a message, and called him back and left a message. And I think I left him 3 messages before I decided that he probably wasn't going to call me back. So I continued through the rest of the curriculum at Pan Am. I did my MEI first, as I think most people did there. Went to the single engine CFI, and then the instrument. And when I finished there, the deal was kind of the same as you. When you finish here at Pan Am, we will get you a job teaching here, and you'll have a full load of students, and you'll get your time quickly. So I finished up and went to see I think it was the assistant chief, and he basically said, "Yeah, we're pretty stacked with instructors right now, so we'll call you when the time comes." Well, how long could that be? And his answer was, I don't know, weeks, months, not sure. Just depends on how quickly the airlines hire our folks away.
Right.
So, I kind of didn't appreciate that answer very much, but, I needed to go find something to do. So I found a gentleman who was an aircraft broker, and he needed somebody to ferry airplanes for him. So I had a couple conversations with him, and he offered me basically daily work to come in and ferry airplanes for him when he needed it. And when he didn't need it, there were a couple occasions where he'd call me in to do basic office work, putting stamps on envelopes and dropping them in the mailbox. But I ended up ferrying a few airplanes for him, all the while going to different flight schools around Phoenix, the Phoenix metro, and dropping off resumes and trying to get an instructing job. So it probably took 3 or 4 months before I walked into Tailwind. I was kind of working my way around the valley and got down to Tailwind, dropped off my resume. And as I was walking in to drop off my resume, T2 was in there, saw me in my T-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops, unshaven, and said, "Hey, why don't you sit down and talk to me for a bit? We'll talk about this right now." Completely unprepared. So if there's a lesson to be learned there, if you're going to drop off a resume, at least be presentable.
I know we were talking earlier, and I was like, you know what? That's probably the reason you got hired. I mean, because I know Tom. He'd be like, "Man, this guy's got the balls to walk in here with flip flops and T-shirt. We got to hire this guy." So yeah, you became part of the staff, the crew there, right?
Yeah, I did, and started picking up students, and I loved being at Tailwind. It was a great environment. we had some really cool people that came in and out. But
Yeah.
just, the group of instructors that we were with, the owners, they were great. I enjoyed my time there. It was short. I think I was there for 4 months. Same situation as before. That whole time I was putting out applications, trying to see who would call.
Yeah.
And the rule was at that time, the rule was, which regional should I go work for? And the answer is whichever one calls you back first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got a phone call. I had all that helicopter time. I didn't have a ton of fixed wing time. I had about 400 hours. And there were some airplanes like ExpressJet wouldn't count any of it. SkyWest would count it at basically half credit. They would give you half credit up to, I think, 250 hours is what it was. But I got a call from Piedmont Airlines, and they said, "Hey, we see your helicopter time here. We see you've got some airplane time here. We'd like to invite you out for an interview." So they flew me out to. At that time, they did their interviews at their corporate headquarters in Salisbury, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
So they flew me out to Salisbury and interviewed, and before I left that day, I had the job.
Wow.
So got back to Phoenix. Of course, I'd kept the owners of Tailwind in the loop of what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and got back, let them know. The Piedmont wanted me to start. I think it was less than 2 weeks later. So, the owners at Tailwind were very happy for me. Of course, they knew that was everybody's goal, was to get out and go get hired by an airline. So, I was able to kind of pack my stuff up and head out to Charlotte to go through training on the dash.
Yeah. And I remember that was a turning point for me as well. You had come in, and within months, you already got a job. And I remember going home. I had a newborn at home, and my wife was working full time, and I was working kind of part time, and on the weekends, so opposite schedules, because I was kind of a stay-at-home dad at that point. And you got the job, and you were like one of the first ones to come in so quickly and get a job that quickly. And I went home and told Julie, I said, I need to start getting my applications, updated and out there, because look at Terry. He came, he's gone already. And as the Squawk Ident listeners know, Mr. Roger Wookie, who has had the privilege of being on the show a few times, he and I started going and getting interviews places, and we'd fly out together. We'd often get the same interview date, and we're like, man, and here you were in ground school over there at Piedmont, and kind of giving us the skinny of what we can expect and how it was. And and I ended up at the airline that we refer to here as a Sandpiper Regional, and kind of got into it, and fortunately or unfortunately for Roger, he ended up taking a different path, as listeners know if you listen back to one of those episodes there with Roger. He's had a pretty tough time. But here you were flying at Piedmont, and you were not there long at all. I think you were there, not much longer than you were at Tailwind. At Tailwind, you were there, what, 4 months, 5 months?
Yeah, I was at Tailwind for 4 months, and I was at Piedmont for about 9 months.
Wow.
So that story. Yeah. So when I got to Piedmont, started flying, and of course, everybody's talking about the staffing and upgrade times, because everyone's goal was to get to a major. And at that point in time, the upgrade time at Piedmont was in about the 10 to 11 year range.
Yeah.
And when I talked to friends who had gone to different airlines, the upgrade times were a lot shorter. And I just thought to myself, man, I can't spend 10 years sitting in the right seat making $25 an hour, and support my family. I've got to go somewhere where I've got a chance of moving on a little bit faster. I wasn't completely sold on that argument until my last instructor from Pan Am. He was kind of hounding me. He was over at ExpressJet, and he said, "Hey, dude, you need to come over here. Upgrade time is 2 to 2.5 years. Come on over here. You'll spend 2 years in the right seat. By the time you finally figure out what you're doing in the right seat, it's going to be time to move on to the left seat. And 4 years, 5 years, you'll be at a major airline."
Yeah.
I was like, that is very enticing. So I kept applying. Once I got the enough airplane time to qualify for ExpressJet's interview, because I still had all that helicopter time. But once I got enough airplane time to qualify for their interview, I went over. I went to the interview. I had nothing to lose, so I was kind of brutally honest in the interview, and I told them that I'm like, hey, if you guys don't hire me, I'll just go back to Piedmont and I'll continue there. And I don't know if that kind of shocked them or what, but I was in class within a couple of months. I was still kind of on the fence about making that jump because I had a bird in the hand already, and I was a little hesitant to make the jump, but then the St. Patrick's Day massacre of 2007 happened.
Yeah.
And it was Philadelphia. So I was based in Roanoke, Virginia with Piedmont, and we got delayed one morning coming out of there. We had an early morning show. It was like 5:30 show for a 6:30 takeoff, and so we're ready to take off at 6:30. There's a ground stop at Philly. I think we ended up taking off around 9 or so. So we land in Philly. As we're coming in on the approach, the arrival ATIS is talking about pellets, and at that point in time, I don't remember exactly, but I want to say that the holdover charts didn't allow for taking off in pellets.
Yeah, I think pellets was a no-go.
Yeah, so we knew that we were going to land. We were supposed to do a quick turn. We knew that wasn't going to happen because the weather was just forecast to get worse in Philly for the rest of the day. So we got to Philly, and we're talking to our operations about when we're going to cancel this flight, and they refused to cancel it. And basically they refused to cancel any of the flights, any of the Piedmont flights that they're supposed to go out that day. So, this continued for the rest of the day until about 5 o'clock. We'd sat out, the crew, we'd all sat out in the airplane with the APU running, just hanging out. We go check with operations every now and then. We go inside and check with the gate agent every now and then. And at one point, the gate agent actually came out to the airplane, and she was like, "What are y'all doing out here?" It was about 5 p.m. She said, "What are y'all doing out here?" "Oh, well, we're hanging out. We can't, they haven't canceled us yet." She's like, "What do you mean they haven't canceled you yet? The airport is closed." Oh, okay. So we immediately got on with dispatch, and my captain sent me inside to go try to work the process to get us some rooms and to coordinate transportation to a hotel.
Right.
As I walked into the terminal, we were kind of, if you've ever been to Philly, I believe it's the F terminal. We were kind of far up in the F terminal, and I walked into the terminal and I looked over to my right where the rest of the terminal is, and it was like the horde of Piedmont crew members coming my direction, all doing the same thing. So, we all go to the counter to try to get our vouchers for hotel rooms and transportation, and basically it was a big mess. But we ended up getting to a hotel, and I was the guy holding the voucher for the van. And if you know anything about Philadelphia and U.S. Airways, you know that the relationship between the citizens of Philadelphia and U.S. Airways was not a good one.
Oh.
So I went to pay the van driver with this voucher that's got U.S. Airways on it, and he refuses to take it. He's like, I'm not taking that. That's U.S. Airways. Yeah, I'm going to take that voucher. They're going to go bankrupt, and I'm not going to get my money. Apparently, he'd been burned before.
Yeah.
So I'm basically in a back and forth with him. And meanwhile, all the other hundreds of crew members are standing there in the lobby of this hotel getting hotel rooms. So I put the driver on the phone with our dispatch, and they basically tell him, you can take the voucher and get something, or you can not take the voucher and get nothing, but nobody there is going to give you any cash. So he rips the voucher out of my hand and takes off. And I get in the line to go get a hotel room, and I'm like one of the last two people in line. So I get up to the desk, and there's three of us or four of us at the counter trying to get a room. There are three rooms left. So two of the four of us are flight attendants. The other FO and I, we agreed that, hey, let's let them have rooms. And then we flipped a coin, he and I lost. So back on the phone with scheduling to let them know that I still don't have a room. To make this very long story a little bit shorter, I ended up finally getting into my room at 11 o'clock that night.
Ouch.
Remember, we had a 5:30 show that morning.
Yeah.
So 11 o'clock that night, I get into my room. After I had to walk 6 blocks in 3 inches of slush to get to this hotel because they had no way to get me to this other hotel.
Oh, you got to be kidding me. Oh.
And that was St. Patrick's Day weekend of 2007. So at that point, I was so frustrated with how that whole event had gone that I was like, you know what, I'm definitely going to ExpressJet. I had already gotten the job offer, so I was definitely going, and that's how I ended up over at ExpressJet.
So that was it. That was the last nail in the coffin.
That was it.
Yeah. So you ended up at ExpressJet on a very very nice airplane. I have an affinity for this particular aircraft, the Embraer 145, and you and I got to share a couple stories over the years when we were both flying the same airplane for respective carriers. And you were there, and I thought it was a pretty bold move and a smart move on your part. You were you weren't even off probation, were you, when you decided to go back to the U.S. Army Reserves?
No, I was still on probation. In fact, the entire time, actually going back to when I was in Phoenix, I was hunting for a reserve unit. I was still in the inactive reserve, and I was just looking for some sort of reserve or guard unit that would be willing to take me. So, while I was in Phoenix, I was checking with the Air Force Reserve and the Air Guard there. There were a couple of units based out of Sky Harbor. And I tried to, the thing about the reserve and the guard is you've got to make the contacts, and they say it's like, rushing a fraternity. You got to go rush and get to know the people and have them get to know you. And I couldn't even get a call back to get into one of those units. And in fact, I learned that the KC-135 unit at Sky Harbor, their commander was also the Civil Air Patrol Squadron commander at Deer Valley.
Oh.
So I started going to Civil Air Patrol meetings at Deer Valley, and this guy was always out on trips, whether it was for the Air Force or for his airline, because he flew for an airline as well. So I was not able to make that connection, but I finally, while I was I think I was still at Piedmont when I started putting some of the pieces together to find an Army Reserve fixed wing unit, and I found one at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So I started talking to them. I went down and interviewed with them, and they agreed to bring me in, and so I got out of the inactive reserve and assigned to this reserve unit. I remember my orders were dated Valentine's Day of 2007, or I'm sorry, 2008. And so it was about a week later that I was driving down from Roanoke, where I was based with Piedmont. I don't think I'd moved to Raleigh yet. But I was driving down, and I get a phone call while I'm driving down, and they said, "Hey, we've got an available seat just popped up for the Army's fixed wing course. Can you go?" I'm like, "Well, when does it start?" "Monday."
Oh. And this was on
Wednesday.
like on a Wednesday. Oh, so like not even a week, like 5 days away.
So that was on Wednesday. So I said, well, let me check with ExpressJet, and I called up the chief pilot's office, and they said, hey, just send us a set of orders, and we'll put you on mill leave. So I called the unit back, said, yeah, no problem, I can make that course, and Sunday I drove from the East Coast back down to Fort Rucker, Alabama, to go through the Army's fixed wing course, and that trip that I finished, I guess it was right at the end of February of, it was 2008. That was my last airline trip ever.
Wow. Yeah, never made it back, huh?
I'm sorry?
You said you never made it back to the airlines.
I never made it back. So, I went down to the course. I came back from so the Army's fixed wing course is 3 months long. I came back from the course. They put me on orders to get me trained up in the unit's operations, and then I deployed in right at the end of July of 2008.
And which deployment was this? Your second deployment or your third at this point?
That was my second.
It was your second, and you went to Iraq. And what equipment were you on? Was that the Uc35?
That was still the C-12.
It was still the C-12. So you went back into the King Air. Okay.
We had the King Air 200 with the Collins Proline 21 system in it, which is better avionics than I was used to coming out of the ERJ.
Yeah.
It was 3-screen glass cockpit. That I think they were LCD screens. I mean, it was really nice setup. So dual FMS, it was great.
You probably can't talk really about the specifics, but what exactly were you doing in theater in a C-12? I mean, were you transporting cargo around or people, or what was your primary objective there?
So our primary mission was moving people around and mostly higher ranking folks. We call them DVs, distinguished visitors, or VIPs. So generals, general officer equivalents who work in civil service. We flew around ambassadors. We flew around mostly higher ranking folks. When we had the opportunity or had a mission, we would always throw on enlisted folks if we could. The lower ranking guys, especially if we went someplace that they were waiting to get a flight out to go on R&R leave, or they were waiting on a flight to get to, say, Baghdad or Kuwait, so they could leave the theater permanently. If we had seats available and there wasn't a distinguished visitor or VIP on board, we'd throw those guys on and take them for a ride.
Yeah, priority. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was a really good mission. We flew some really cool missions. Got to mostly in the C-12. It was mostly between Kuwait and Iraq, though.
Okay. So you were there for how many months at that point on that deployment?
So that deployment was supposed to be a year. I left after 3 months due to a medical issue, and I stayed back at the unit at Fort Bragg on orders while I got my medical issue sorted out, and then went back on orders shortly after that again to learn how to fly the UC-35, the Cessna Citation 500 series.
And was that again in Alabama, or did you move at that point?
No, so that course is actually done through flight safety.
Oh.
So it's a 5-week Army course. The first 3 weeks is it's the same curriculum that a civilian pilot would go through if they went to flight safety to get a type rating and a Citation Ultra or Citation Encore. So we did that first 3 weeks at flight safety, and then what the Army does is they add on 2 weeks at the end where you're in the actual airplane flying around with an instructor, just to get the feel of the airplane, because it's a pretty significant difference when you go from a King Air that's cruising at 200 knots to a Citation that's cruising at about 410, 420.
Right.
So it makes for a big difference, and guys just have to. That 2 weeks basically is just to get guys used to the speed of how much faster things happen.
Right. So that was quite the experience. You got to, you started out in an Apache, and now here you are in a UC-35 or a Citation, I think you said a 500 equivalent. And that took, what, about 12 years to go from commission, get your first assignment, and then 12 years later, through some very intelligent, strategic chess piece moves here. I mean, here you are, you go to one school, and here now you had applications out, and this is what I just so impressed with your logic, your reasoning. You've always kind of impressed me with how you don't fall for the status quo in terms of, well, this, you're gonna have to do this, and then you have to do that, and you're not sitting there going, oh, that's the way it's going to be. That's what I got to do. Here you were putting applications out for CFI jobs before you were even a CFI. You were so far ahead of your mindset. Most people, I think, that I've talked to over the years that are in flight training or have gone through the flight training have said, yeah, man, I was concentrating on studying. I didn't have time to put apps out anywhere. I didn't think of that till I was done. I wanted to be done before I did that. And here you were always one piece ahead on this like strategy for your journey and your career. And you kind of have done that, throughout your journey. And here you are now flying Citation jet for the U.S. Army. And you were telling me that pretty much right after that, didn't you get deployed yet again?
Yeah, so I finished the Citation course, and then about 2 or 3 months after that is when I got deployed to Afghanistan. So I spent 6 months over there in command of the jet detachment, and our primary job was flying around VIPs. In fact, funny story, if anyone is familiar with when General Stanley McChrystal was over there, and the Rolling Stone magazine did a big article on him and some of the stuff that he said on a trip to Paris, I think, with his staff. That was a lot of those conversations happened on an airplane that was flown by the guys who we replaced. So that happened like 3 months before we got there with the unit that we replaced. So those are the types of customers that we flew over there in Afghanistan. We flew, of course, when General Petraeus got there to replace General McChrystal, he managed to finagle a Gulfstream. So he got the Air Force Gulfstream guys to fly him. But we flew, our customers again were 2 and 3 star generals, 2 and 3 star admirals, and we flew the British ambassador to NATO. He was a regular customer of ours, so we got to fly some really important people around, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And you also at the same time were starting to get notified, I believe, from ExpressJet a little bit after that, or was that after you came back?
No, that was after I came back. In fact, I think my timing in leaving, I was very fortunate in the way the timing worked out as far as me going on military leave, because it was in I think it was early 2009 when the big furloughs started hitting, and ExpressJet ended up furloughing 500 pilots. And of course, during a furlough, they chop off. They start at the bottom of the list, and so by the time they had furloughed 500 pilots, I was still on the seniority list, but I only had 7 pilots below me.
Oh, so you came really close, yeah.
Yeah, so when you're talking about a 3,000 pilot company and they furlough 500, that's pretty significant. So me being gone and having a of income and employment was very fortunate for me. And me being gone, I don't take any credit for it, but me being gone, hopefully somebody got to stay.
Yeah.
Because I was gone.
So after that program, when you came back, was that when you went into the U.S. Army Jet School instructor position?
It was shortly after that. I came back. My Army boss wanted me to stay on orders, so he kept me on orders for about a year until I got offered the position to go to the official name is the U.S. Army Jet Training Detachment, and still at this time it's at Dobbins Air Reserve Base in just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. They're actually getting ready to move, but they're still there at this time, and so I got offered that position to go be the executive officer, so the number 2 in charge there, as well as be an instructor in the airplane. So got qualified as an instructor, and I kind of ran the day-to-day operations of the school while I was there, and I was there for 2.5 years.
Yeah. So after that, you had to make a decision. After 17 years of active service, ExpressJet said, well, your military leave, you've been able to extend it, and now either you come back or you forfeit your number. How did that decision sit with you?
That happened, it was a little over a year ago. And so every January 1st that I was away from the airline, they would send me an email saying, hey, just want to verify that you're still intending on staying out on military leave. If so, just send us a copy of your orders, and we'll put you out on military leave. So I think it was in sometime in the 2018 time frame where ExpressJet was purchased by a different entity. It had gone through multiple different ownerships, but it transitioned from being owned by SkyWest Holdings to being owned by some other group. And this group, I guess when the management changed, some processes kind of changed. So they, again, January 1st of 2019, or shortly thereafter, they called me and left me a voicemail asking if I was still intending on staying out on military leave. And I called them back, said, yeah, I'm still going to stay out. Here's a copy of my orders. It's the same orders that I've been sending them for 3 years, but hey, they wanted another copy, so I sent it to them. And after I sent them the copy, it was maybe about 2 or 3 days later, I got a phone call, and it's from the chief pilot in Chicago, which is where I was allegedly based, even though I'd never been there. But he called me, and he's like, hey, I'm looking here, and you've been gone for over 10 years. Yep. He's like, are you intending on ever coming back? I said, well, if you keep me on the books, I'll come back in about three-ish years. He's like, yeah, I don't think we can do that. So basically the way the rest of the conversation went was, hey, you can send us a letter of resignation, or we can administratively terminate you, which it's not anything negative. It's just, hey, you've exceeded your military leave available as authorized by federal law, so you're terminated. Terminated always sounds bad.
Yeah.
So I sent him a letter of resignation, said, let's do this on clean terms, at least for me,
Sure.
and be done with it. So
that just happened recently, actually. But you have actually had another transition that we didn't really talk much about, was the transition that you made from the citation over to back to rotor wing. What happened there? How did that process happen?
yeah, so I was selected for command, for battalion command in the Army, which is a pretty big deal. It's for a lot of people, it's kind of the pinnacle of the Army career. So I was selected to command, but the units that were available were helicopter units. We didn't have any fixed wing units that were available at that time. A lot of stuff in the military is about luck and timing, and a lot of stuff in life, for that matter. But the timing did not work out for a fixed wing unit, nor did the opportunity. So I, being selected for command is a huge honor. Just being entrusted with the lives of our young soldiers, make decisions that will affect their lives and their careers. It's a huge honor, and it's not something, I had applied for it, and to be selected was just it was crazy. So the unit that I was selected to take command of was a UH-60 Black Hawk unit, and out of Fort Knox, Kentucky. So because it was a Black Hawk unit and I wasn't qualified in a Black Hawk, I had to go to school again. So went to school. The Black Hawk course is 6 weeks long, because at that point you already know how to fly a helicopter. But I'd been out of helicopters for 12 or 13 years. But it's kind of like riding a bike. You get back on it, and the Blackhawk is a great aircraft. It's purpose built. It's built to take troops into battle, and it does that exceptionally well. So took that transition, took command of the battalion, and got them prepared during my command tenure. I got them prepared to deploy. They deployed about 6 months after I changed out of command, and just got back about a month ago. So, and they were extremely successful in everything they did. So that was really awesome. Very rewarding for me to see how successful they were. Very rewarding to know that I played a part in getting them ready to go do that. So It's really cool.
And are you you're not doing the battalion command anymore? What did you transition to after that?
So I changed out of battalion command, and I went to work on a general staff for about 9 months as a deputy operations officer, and then I only went for that long because I knew that I had already been selected to attend the U.S. Air Force War College. So that's where I am now in Montgomery, Alabama, and stationed at Maxwell Air Force Base, learning about strategy and strategic leadership, and should finish up in May, at the end of May, and then I'm not sure what happens next.
Wow. So here you are, 45?
43.
43, getting your second master's. You've got multiple type ratings in both rotor wing and fixed wing, continuing your service. And I've got to say, congratulations. I saw that you now have a new title just recently, not long ago. And what's that?
Yeah, so I got promoted to colonel on January 1st. So pretty humbling. It was kind of funny. I was telling some of my friends that in the military uniform we have our hat that we wear, and it's got our rank on the top of it. And I was telling some of my friends that I've never been intimidated by my own hat before. It's pretty.
That's great.
It's almost surreal getting to this point, because growing up in the military, you're like, oh, the colonel, he's the old man. Now I'm the old man. So it's crazy. It's very, very humbling, and I'm very honored to have made it this far in the career.
Yeah.
And just hope to continue to do it right.
Yeah. Any plans for the future that you're willing to indulge here today on Squawk Ident?
I would say that retirement isn't terribly far away. I envision myself at a major airline before I turn 50. Hopefully,
do you still want to do it?
That too, but
are you still interested in the whole airline progression?
Oh, absolutely. That's that's been my goal for many years. The reason why, the biggest reason why I came back into the reserve was because the military is about people, and you miss when I was out, I missed the people that I had served with, and it's not any one particular person. It's just the people as a whole. They're the ones that make this such a rewarding activity. So I miss the people, but there's always something else, and the something else for me was the career progression at the regionals in 2008, 2009. After ExpressJet's fortunes changed very quickly from 2 to 2.5 year upgrades to you better hope you still have a job.
Yeah.
So when that happened, my thought was, well, hey, I can stay in the military. I can continue to build turbine pilot and command time in the military, which I'm not anywhere close to at the airline, and maybe be able to get a leg up and get to a major airline sooner when the hiring finally starts to pick up again.
Yeah.
That didn't
Honestly,
happen.
you
2013, I had applications with United and Delta and everybody, and nobody called. So didn't quite work out that way. But I am totally not unhappy
yeah.
with the way things have turned out.
You actually are very fortunate, I think. You're in a very good position because in the next 2 to 3 years, the hiring blitz will definitely happen unless something major changes, like retirement age gets moved. But the numbers are staggering. I know we talk about it quite a bit here on the show with how many projected hiring numbers that most of the majors have right now. They're in the thousands. I mean, I remember when you said 300 pilots a year. I mean, oh wow, that's a lot. Now we're talking about 1,200, 1,300 pilots a year, and that's huge. And I think if this is the road that you do intend to go down in the next few years after retirement, I wish you all the success. I think it's not going to be a problem for you to go directly to a mainline or a major airline from that point. I really don't think at this point, with the experience you have, that it would be necessary for you to get back into a regional level. I think your experience speaks for itself, and going directly to a mainline is definitely an opportunity for you. A couple questions I did want to ask you before we wrap it up here today.
Yeah.
Biggest challenge in aviation so far?
Getting my medical back.
Yeah.
Of course there was nothing I could really do about that, but all the cards were kind of stacked against me. When I mentioned that I'd gotten sick overseas and got sent home from Iraq. Navigating that process, I was fortunate enough. Army flight surgeons are good people, and they do a great job. But most of them are overworked and don't have enough time in the day to get done everything they need to do as far as seeing patients and making sure that they get all their paperwork done and all of that. I was fortunate enough to be a part of that unit at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Flight surgeons have to actually fly in aircraft to earn their flight pay and maintain their status as flight surgeons. So flight surgeons would come from all over and fly with us all the time because they would much rather ride in a nice plush leather seat in the back of a UC-35 than they would in a jump seat in a Black Hawk. So much more comfortable, much more enjoyable, and easier on the body. So we had flight surgeons from all over that would come to fly with us quite a bit. But the ones that really worked to help me get my medical back all came out of Special Operations Command. There's several, Fort Bragg's kind of the home of Army Special Operations. And so their flight surgeons would come and fly with us all the time. And they would always tell us, hey, if you need anything, you let us know and we'll come help you out. And I cashed in on that chip hard when I asked them to help me navigate that process. And they did it without a second thought. And, I fully credit them for saving my flying career. Because without them, I probably would not have been able to successfully navigate that process. So
yeah, and that's a process that even here at Mainline, I've heard stories, and now our union is very adamant about expressing, if you have a problem medically, before you even go see a doctor outside of the realm of a flight doctor, you go to the union medical personnel that are in charge of helping navigate that process. So we have an advantage of having a department specifically for us, and that department over at Legacy's Union has saved the careers and the medical certificates of countless pilots that, if they would have gone through the general medical field to do the process that was then recommended by their general doctors, they could have potentially have lost their medical forever. So
Right.
yeah, having that paperwork, going through the right channels, making sure that the verbiage is absolutely perfect in the paperwork, so that the wrong word isn't used by a physician, that then the FAA flight surgeon says, "Oh, well, sorry." So yeah, that process can be very, very difficult to navigate, and it sounds like that would be anyone's biggest challenge, really. Do you have an experience that you'd like to share, that, like, if you were to say, tell me about one time that you said that that's it, this is the pinnacle experience that I've had thus far in my career, what would that be? Can you think of anything?
As far as a pinnacle experience, I'm not sure. I think, being able to, um, to instruct in the UC-35 as a commissioned officer. What a lot of people don't know about the Army is most of our pilots are warrant officers. Warrant officers are the technical and tactical experts. They are the ones who do the hard jobs, like instructor pilot and maintenance test pilot and safety officer, tactical operations officer. They do those hard jobs that are directly related to flying. They learn their craft, they hone their craft, and they do a tremendous job. It's rare. It's getting a little more common, but it's pretty rare for a commissioned officer, someone in the lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel ranks, to actually be an instructor pilot. I got that opportunity as one of the very, very few, very lucky ones. And at one point, I was the only commissioned officer in the United States Army that was an instructor pilot on the UC-35.
Wow.
So that only lasted for a couple of months, but I was able to. I could say that I was that guy for a short period of time, which was pretty cool. But so I would say, that was a pretty cool experience. Just being able to do that and to serve in that capacity that very few commissioned officers get to do.
Yeah. And have you had a favorite aircraft? Like, if you had to pick one airplane, it's like, this is my favorite, or one helicopter, or one whatever.
It's hard for anything to beat the Apache. I mean, that thing is it's a flying tank. It's maneuverable. It's an agile aircraft, and it can take the fight to the bad guys and come home, and it's just a great aircraft. That's probably been my favorite one to fly. The one that I am most comfortable in is probably the UC-35. I mean, I've got about 23 or 2,400 hours in the Army, and flying hours in the Army, and 13, I think I'm close to 1,400 hours of that was in the UC-35. So that's the one I'm the most comfortable in. That when you go and you get in the airplane, it feels like you're strapping it on and you're just going to work.
Nice.
You can make the airplane you want or need it to do at any time. That's kind of the level of comfort that I got to in that aircraft. So
yeah. And you've had a pretty distinguished flying career thus far. Have you had any emergencies that stand out as probably some of the most challenging events?
Nothing terribly major. I've had a hydraulic pump malfunction in the UC-35 that required us to. We were going into Fort Knox, and the runway's short there, so we ended up diverting over to Louisville and landing on the long runway there, using the emergency braking capability of the aircraft. And then the funny part of that story is there was a news helicopter airborne at the time. So they got video of us all the way in on the approach, landing, and then they kind of hung out there as we all got off the airplane with our passengers. And the fire department was like, "Hey, everybody okay? All right, good. Let's get this airplane over the hold short line so they can open the runway back up." So we literally all got out and pushed the airplane over the hold short line
with your VPs on board and all.
Yeah. So that was kind of funny, but that's probably the biggest emergency I've had, which is in 4,000 plus hours of flying. That's pretty. I can consider myself lucky.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then there's I mean, we could tell stories, flying stories for days. I mean, that's what pilots do. But
yep.
It's I can tell an instructing story about how if you're going to be the instructor, you need to be prepared to be the instructor. You need to be ready, because when you're in a straight wing jet, you rotate off the runway and you execute a simulated engine failure, you pull the engine back to idle. You better be ready for that, because the airplane's gonna try to point its nose a different direction than you're trying to go. And if you're not ready for that, and your student's not ready for that, it gets exciting very quickly.
Right. Yeah. See, now that's the difference between flight training in a military background, military environment versus flight training in a commercial airline environment. We can't do those things with people on the airplane.
Right.
So everything's in a simulator, and obviously you're on the ground and you're safe. So yeah, those and there was a time in I'd probably say 30 plus years ago where flight simulators were not what they are today, and the passengers would be dropped off, and then that airplane stayed overnight at base, and then the instructor and the students for the airline would then get in that empty airplane, and they'd have a flight plan, and they'd go up and they would do flight training in the actual airplane, empty airplane, in an area that was designated for such. And so yeah, there was a time where you would take an airliner and simulate an engine emergency or V1 cut, in the airplane. But as simulators, became more and more advanced, there was absolutely no need to put the aircraft at risk, put, lives of the pilots at risk. So that's gone. But it sounds like you guys still kind of do that kind of training, GA style. Oh, you got an engine failure. What are you going to do? What's your memory item?
Yeah.
So
we do. We don't have any. The Army doesn't own any UC-35 simulators, so all we do the standard recurrent every 12 to 18 months. We'll go to flight safety and do our 3-4 days of academics and engine failures and all that stuff, sim. But every year, especially when it's time to take a check ride, it's in the airplane. Your simulated engine failures happen in the airplane, so. Just as an instructor, you got to be ready for them. Yeah.
And we can sit here, like you said, and share instructor stories till we're blue in the face. Maybe another show. Maybe we'll have a show just telling stories about flight training. But Terry, I want to just say thank you so much for spending the time with us today, taking time out of your time at home. We got to hear a little bit about with the kids in the background, and I know your wife's doing her best to to keep them at bay. But for those of us that have children at home, myself included, I know exactly you're doing your best to keep them kind of quiet while you're spending time with us. And thank your wife, please, for doing the duty of trying to wrangle them for us. And we love hearing them, by the way. Absolutely great. They sound so happy, and I love seeing all your photos that you post on social media there occasionally of your very beautiful family. So congratulations, Colonel, on your new title, and look forward to keeping up with you and seeing your progression. And if you decide to pull the trigger and retire, by all means, you know, follow your traditional path that you followed and start putting those apps out, weeks or months in advance, because that seems to have worked for you very well in your career progression. Is there anything else left that you'd like to have a couple final thoughts there?
No, I would I'd just like to say thanks to you for having me on. It's been a good time. Enjoyed it. It's always fun telling war stories. But I've really enjoyed your podcast and keeping up with it from the beginning, and hearing all these great stories, all these different varied journeys that people have taken to get to where they are, has just been it's just been really cool. So I would say continue that. Everybody's got a story. They're all different. They're all unique, and it's awesome hearing them. So keep doing what you're doing. I love it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your support. You've been so supportive from the very beginning, even on those early shows, which I'm a little embarrassed about because I'm still growing and developing. But the other day I stopped and listened to like my first 2 shows. I hadn't listened to them in months. I was listening to them going, oh boy, I've really developed. I've developed and grown this show. So. Well, that's a good thing. But thank you.
It's a journey, Yeah, it's a journey.
It's a journey in podcasting about aviation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me in saying thank you to Colonel Terry Schooler for your time. Thank you, sir, for your service to our country. And thank you for just being an awesome aviator and a very humble individual.
Oh, thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. It's been great. Thank you to everyone for your support. I know all of us in the military appreciate the support that everyone gives us, and we're thankful to serve. We're happy to serve, and happy to give back. So,
ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up episode 27. I want to again thank Colonel Schooler for taking a moment out of his time at home with his family to spend it with us here at Squawk Ident. Listening to him share his journey in aviation with us was an honor. We have more exciting and inspirational interviews coming up on Squawk Ident, so stay tuned for new episodes being released soon. Are you enjoying Squawk Ident? Please visit our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango, Oscar November Yankee.com. There you can check out episode cover art, episode archives, the pilot shop. You can even leave audio feedback, and now you can check out the Flightline photo tab, where we post photos from the Flightline over the past few decades. You can also contribute to the show and help us with equipment, software, and marketing expenses by becoming a producer of Squawk Ident, either with a one-time donation or a monthly contribution. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter users can search Squawk Ident Podcast or Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident to follow us on the socials. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and you like what you hear, then it would be great if you could leave us a positive review and share the show with someone who you might think would enjoy Squawk Ident. In closing, I'd just like to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this grateful aviator. Keep the dirty side down, be safe, and take care of each other.